Hello, bruvs. We're back with Alraune, a 1911 novel translated in this 1929 edition by S. Guy and illustrated by Malon Blaine. Let's just get to chapter 13, get it over with. I'm mainly trying to get this book done with so I can watch the two movies that are based on it. I don't know how accurate they are to it, but we'll see. Chapter 13, in which is disclosed how Duchess Wolkonsky told Alraune the truth. Chapter 13, in which is disclosed and there's the feedback. Even though I turned the volume off, there's the feedback. Thanks. King's Counsel Gontram wrote to the Duchess, who was at Nauheim taking the baths, and described the situation to her. It took a little time before she understood what it was all about. Frida Gontram had to go to a great deal of trouble to make the matter clear to her. At first she just laughed. Then she grew thoughtful. Finally she began to moan and whimper. When her daughter came into the room, she threw her arms upon the latter's neck and wept copious tears. You poor child, she howled. We are beggars. We must go live on the streets. And her oriental mind overflowed with rare caustic curses that she heaped unstintingly upon his dead excellency's head. Oh, it isn't that bad, Frida objected. You still have your villa in Bonn and your little castle on the Rhine. Furthermore, there's the profits from your Hungarian vineyards, and there's Olga's Russian bonds. And one can't live on that, the old Duchess interrupted. We'll all starve to death. We must try to dissuade Miss Ten Brinken, Frida remarked, just as Papa advises. He's an ass, your Papa, she cried. An old scoundrel. He was in league with the Privy Councillor. They're both a fine pair of thieves. It's through him that I met that ugly rogue, and she went on declaiming that all men were treacherous knaves. In all her life she had not yet come across an honest man. There was, for example, Olga's husband, that pretty scamp of a Count Albrantes. Look at the way he carried on with rotten variety actresses and spent all of Olga's money that he could lay his hands on. Now he was off for good, since his excellency had refused to advance him another cent, living with a circus bareback rider. Hello, bruvs. Then his excellency accomplished at least one good act in his life, the countess interrupted. Good? Her mother screamed. What does it matter who stole the money? Both of them are pigs, dirty pigs. But she finally came to the realization that an attempt of some kind had to be made to retrieve this loss. She herself would go to Lendenich. From this decision, both Olga and Frida dissuaded her. She would be likely to be carried away by her anger and would accomplish no more than the directors. What was needed was diplomacy, Frida declared. With proper skill, one might triumph over Alraune's whims and caprices. She herself would go to Lendenich. Yes, that would be best. I'm reading Alraune by Heinz Ewers. The aged Duchess was opposed to this, but Frida insisted that it would be most unhealthful indeed for her to interrupt her cure and expose herself to so much excitement. That convinced the Duchess. Then the two friends came to an agreement, and both together journeyed to Lendenich. The Duchess remained at the baths, but not in idleness. She went to the pastor and ordered 100 masses for the poor soul of his dear departed excellency, and paid cash in advance. That's very Christian, she decided, since her own dead husband was Orthodox. She drove over to Wiesbaden and paid the Pope of the Russian chapel for 100 masses to the credit of his soul. That calmed her considerably, though for a moment she was disturbed by the reflection that after all the Privy Councillor was not only a Protestant, but a freethinker as well, and Catholic masses would be of little avail to such a soul. Then she decided that it would be considered as an even more kind and praiseworthy act. For did it not say, bless them that curse ye, love your enemy as yourself, and do good to them who insult and persecute ye? Oh, they would surely have to take that into account up there. And twice a day in her prayer she added with deep fervor an extra plea for his excellency. Thus she bribed the Lord. Frank Braun received the two ladies at Lendennick and led them to the terrace, where they chatted of olden days. Try your luck, children, he said, but let me tell you that all my talking did no good. What did she say to you? Frida asked. Not much, he laughed. She did not even pay attention. She made a deep curtsy and explained with a devilishly respectful smile on her face that she valued my guardianship far too highly to deny herself the pleasure just for the sake of the Duchess. She added that she didn't wish to talk about it any more, and she curtsied again even more deeply, smiled again even more deferentially, and left. Haven't you tried again? The Countess inquired. No, Olga, he said. I'll leave that to you. Her expression as she left was so determined that I, for my part, am convinced that my persuasive powers will be of no greater avail than were those of the board of directors. He rose and rang for tea. Besides, I feel that there is a possibility for you, he continued. When I told my cousin, after the King's Council had telephoned me in regard to your visit, that you were coming and why she did not refuse to receive you, as I had feared. I had expected to have to plead with her, for I wanted to do that much for you, but I was mistaken. She declared at once that you were both welcome. She added that for some months she had been in active correspondence with both of you. So, Frida Gontram interrupted him. You write to her? She cried shrilly, facing Olga. Countess Olga stuttered. I just wrote a few times. Condolences and you lie, Frida exclaimed. Whereupon the Countess jumped up. And you? Don't you write her? I knew all along that you were writing to her. Haven't I noticed how many hours you spend in your room every second day? So you have the chambermaid spy on me. Frida came back. The two friends looked at each other with eyes full of hate, cutting more sharply than words. They understood each other fully. The Countess felt that for the first time she was about to refuse to do what her friend demanded, and Frida sensed this first revolt against her dominance. But they were bound by too many common memories through the long years they had lived together for all their friendship to be consumed in a moment's quarrel. Frank Braun took in the situation at a glance. I'm disturbing you, he said. Besides, Alraune will soon be here. She just went up to dress. He walked over to the stairs and bowed. I hope to see you again this evening. The friends said nothing. Olga reclined in a reed chair. Frida walked up and down, taking big strides. Then she stopped in front of her friend. Listen, Olga, she said softly. Haven't I always helped you, no matter what it was, in earnest or in sport, in all your adventures and your love affairs? Isn't that so? The Countess nodded. Yes, that's true, but I've always done the same for you. I've helped you just as much. As much as you could, Frida answered. I'm not going to deny what you've done for me. Then shall we remain good friends? Of course, Countess Olga cried. Only I'm not asking so much of you. What is that you're asking? And she answered, Don't put any obstacles in my way. Obstacles, Frida returned. What kind of obstacles do you mean? Let each one have a try at her luck, just as I suggested at the carnival ball. No, the Countess insisted. I don't wish to play against you. I've played so often and always lost. It's unfair, and that's why I want you to withdraw, just for my sake. What do you mean, unfair? Frida Gontram cried out. Why, everything is in your favor. You have all the beauty. Yes, her friend replied, but that's nothing at all. You are the cleverer one, and I've often had occasion to note that in such matters brains count more than beauty. Frida Gontram took her hand. Look, Olga, she said caressingly. Let's be reasonable. We haven't come here for the sake of our emotions. Listen to me. If I should succeed in changing Alraune's mind, if I manage to save those millions for you and your mother, then will you give me a free hand? Go now into the garden and let me be alone with her. Big tears rolled out of the eyes of Countess Olga. I can't, she whispered. Let me speak to her. I'll gladly give you all the money. You know yourself that this is only a passing fancy to you. Frida sighed heavily, threw herself down on the chaise lounge, and gripped the silken cushions with her lean hands. Do you think that I would make so much fuss over a whim? I'm afraid I'm in just as deeply as you. Her features grew rigid, her hard, clear eyes looked out into vacancy. Olga was stricken with pity, jumped from her chair, kneeled down before Frida, who bent her blonde head over. Their hands sought each other, they embraced tightly and mingled their tears together. What shall we do? The Countess asked. Renounce, Frida Gontram said sharply, both of us, come what may. Countess Olga nodded and pushed her body closer to that of her friend. Stand up, the latter whispered. Here she comes. Dry your eyes quick. Here, take my handkerchief. Olga obeyed and walked over to the other side, but Alraune Ten Brinken had not failed to observe the situation, and she understood at once what had happened. She stood at the big door, clad in a black sweater like the merry prince from the Fledermaus. She bowed curtly, greeted and kissed the lady's hands. Mustn't cry, she laughed. Mustn't cry, it spoils your pretty eyes. She clapped her hands and called to the butler to serve champagne. She herself filled the goblets, passed them to the ladies, and urged them to drink. That's customary here, she trilled, pardon. Chacun a son gout. Gout? I don't know what the fuck that means. She led Countess Olga to the couch and caressed her plump arms. Then she sat down by Frida's side and cast long, laughing glances at her. She adhered to her role of the wooing prince, offered the ladies cake and pastry, sprinkled the ladies' handkerchiefs with eau d'Espagne from her little golden flask, and suddenly she began, Isn't it really too sad for words that I can't help you? I'm so extremely sorry. Frida Gontram sat up and rather painfully brought herself to say, And why not? I have absolutely no reason, Alraune replied. Really, none at all. I just simply don't want to, that's all. She turned to the Countess. Will your mother suffer much thereby? She stressed the much, twittering shrilly in a voice so sweet and cruel like a swallow hunting insect prey. The Countess trembled beneath her glance. Oh no, she said, not so very, and she repeated what Frida had said. She still has her villa in Bonn and the little castle on the Rhine. Then there's the rent from the Hungarian vineyards, and finally I still have the interest on my Russian bonds, and she stopped. She knew of nothing else. She had only the vaguest conception of her financial situation. Of money she knew only that it enabled one to go into stores and buy hats and other pretty things, and no doubt there would be plenty left for that. She apologized for disturbing Alraune. It was really just an idea of mother's. Miss Ten Brinken needn't trouble herself at all, and she hoped that this little incident would not mar oh man, their friendship. She chatted on without reflection, silly, senseless amiabilities. She did not notice her friend's severe glances. She cuddled up warmly beneath the green, radiating eyes of Alraune. She felt like a bunny come from the forest into a sunny cabbage patch. Frida Gontram grew restless. At first, the enormous stupidity of her friend incensed her. Then she began to smile at the insipid manner which Olga employed to win Alraune. No fly ever alighted so clumsily on a dish of poisoned sugar. But as Olga went on merrily, Frida sensed how her own feelings were being aroused, how beneath the eyes of Alraune her habitual icy reserve was rapidly melting away, despite her particular attempts to maintain a cautious sang-froid. Now her eyes began to wander and ever and again returned with waxing jealousy to the slender body of Prince Orlowski. Alraune noticed it. I thank you, dear Countess, she said. What you have just said allays my fears considerably. She turned to Frida Gontram. You know the king's council told me all kinds of wild stories about the Duchess's absolute ruin. Frida pulled herself together with a final exertion. My father was right, she declared abruptly. Of course, a complete collapse is unavoidable. The Duchess will have to sell the castle. Oh, that's nothing at all, the Countess insisted. We're never there anyhow. Shut up, Frida cried. Her eyes were dim. She felt that she was battling in vain for a lost cause. The Duchess will have to recast her life completely, sell her effects. It's doubtful if she'll even be able to keep a car. Most likely not. It will be hard for her to accustom herself to the new conditions. Isn't that too bad? The Black Prince piped. Her carriages and horses will have to be sold, Frida continued, and most of the servants dismissed. Alraune interrupted her. And how will you manage, Miss Gontram? Will you continue to stay with the Duchess? The question was so unexpected that she was taken aback. She stuttered. Why, of course. Then Miss Ten Brinken piped sweetly. Otherwise, it would please me greatly to be able to offer you the hospitality of my house. I am so alone and I really crave company. Why won't you come and stay with me? Frida hesitated for a moment. With you, miss? But Olga interceded. No, she must stay with us. She can't leave mother now. I was never at your mother's, Frida Gontram declared. I was with you. That makes no difference, the Countess cried. With me or with her, I don't want you to stay here. Oh, I beg your pardon, Alraune mocked. I thought Miss Gontram was free to do as she chose. Countess Olga, let me start that again. Countess Olga, rose from the couch. No, she cried. No. I won't have anybody who doesn't come of her own free will, the prince laughed. That's the rule of the house, and I won't even urge. Stay if you please, Miss Gontram, but if you'd rather be with the Duchess. She stepped up, close to Frida. Your brother was my closest chum, she said slowly, and my playmate. I often kissed him. And she saw how this woman, who was nearly twice her age, lowered the lids of her eyes against her gaze, and she felt how her hands grew moist at the slightest contact with her own. This was a priceless victory. Her soul quaffed it exultingly. Will you stay with me? She whispered. Frida Gontram breathed heavily. Without raising her eyes, she stepped up to the Countess. Pardon me, Olga, she said, but I must stay. Then her friend threw herself down on the sofa and buried her head in the cushions, while her whole body heaved with hysterical sobbing. No, she whined. No. She half rose and raised her hand as though she would beat her friend. Then she burst into shrill laughter. Without hat or parasol, she ran down the steps across garden. Are we live? The orientation is fucked. Her friend called after her, Olga, listen to me, Olga. But Miss Ten Brinken said haughtily, let her be. She'll soon come to her senses. Frank Braun was having his breakfast outside in the... I guess I should pause there since it's a new paragraph. Frank Braun was having his breakfast. Frida Gontram was pouring tea for him. It's certainly good for this old house that you're here, he said. One never sees you doing anything, and yet everything is running as smooth as silk. The servants have taken a strange dislike to my cousin, which has led them to adopt a kind of passive resistance. These people have naturally no knowledge of the weapons of class warfare, but they had nevertheless reached a certain stage of sabotage, and it would have come to an open revolt a long time ago if they didn't still cherish a remnant of affection for me. Now you are here, and suddenly everything seems to be working of itself. I have to compliment you, Frida. Thanks, she replied. I am happy to be able to do something for Alraune. But, he continued, they miss you all the more at the Duchess's, and particularly since they have stopped payments at the bank. Everything is topsy-turvy. Here, take a look at this mail. He pushed a few letters across the table. But Frida Gontram shook her head. No, Forgive me, I don't wish to read anything. I don't want to know anything about it. He insisted, but Frida, you must know. And if you don't wish to read the letter, I'll tell you all about it in very few words. Your friend has been found. Is she alive? Frida whispered. Yes, she's alive, he informed her. When she ran away from here, she wandered about all night long and throughout the next day. At first, she went inland into the mountains. Then she circled around and came back to the Rhine. At Remagen, some workmen on the ferry saw her and had their suspicions aroused by her queer behavior. And when she jumped off the cliff, they rowed over and soon fished her out. That was about noon 4 days ago. Despite her violent struggles, they took her to jail. Frida Gontram put her head in her hands. To jail? She asked in a low voice. Of course, he answered. Where else could they take her? It was plain that if they set her free, she would at once seek to kill herself again. In jail, they can watch such people better than elsewhere. Moreover, she refused to give any information about herself. She had thrown away her watch, her purse, and even her handkerchief long before she attempted suicide by drowning, and no one could figure out the silly initials and crowns embroidered on her linen. It was only when the letters sent broadcast by her father through official channels reached the Remagen police authorities that they were able to identify their prisoner. Where is she? Frida asked. In the city. He replied. The King's Council brought her back from Remagen and took her to Professor Dahlberg's private insane asylum. Here is his report. It looks as though she might have to stay there quite a long time. Last night the Duchess arrived. Frida, you ought to go see your friend soon. The professor says she is very quiet and calm. Frida Gontram arose. No, no, she cried out. I can't. Slowly she walked away over the gravel walk beneath the sweet-smelling Spanish lilacs. Frank Braun gazed after her. She had paused in trying to peer through the rows of copper beeches that lined the drive to the master house. Suddenly, a smile like a ray of sunlight illuminated her cold face that was like a marble mask of fate, and from beyond the trees sounded Alraune's clear laughter. Her power is strange indeed, he thought. Uncle Jacob's last reflections in the leather-bound volume are quite right. He pondered, oh yes, it was surely hard to tear oneself away from her. No one knew what it was, and yet they all flew into the hot blazing flame. And he too? One thing was certain, there was something here that lured him. He did not fully understand how it worked, whether in his senses or in his blood, or perhaps even in his brain, but that it did work, that he sensed to the quick. It was not true that he was prolonging his stay here only on account of her affairs, the suits and settlements. He could very well have superintended all the remaining business without being personally present, especially now that the ultimate crash of the Mulheim Bank was a settled question. And still he remained. He realized that he was lying to himself, that he was continually inventing new excuses with all manner of tiresome negotiations in order to postpone his departure. And it seemed to him that his cousin must be aware of it, indeed as though it were her quiet influence that caused him thus to deceive himself. I'm going home tomorrow, he decided. Then the idea occurred to him. Why should he run away? Was he afraid? Did he fear this delicate child? Had he been infected by the silly notions that his uncle had inscribed in the leather-bound volumes? What might happen? At the very worst, just a little affair. Certainly not his first, and hardly likely to be his last. Was he not an equal match for her, possibly her superior? Had not his past life led across many a dead body, and had he ever hesitated to follow where his fate led? Then why should he flee now? He, Frank Braun, had created her, once, long, long ago. It had been his idea, and his uncle had but served as a tool. She was his creature more than that of his excellency. He had been young then, and as sparkling and effervescent as new wine. His mind was full of wild dreams, full of heaven assailing fantasies. He had used the stars as tennis balls. In the dark forests of the subconscious, he found a rare fruit and brought it to a good gardener, who planted the seed in the earth, watered the germ, cared for the seedling, and tended the young tree. Now he had returned, and lo, there blossomed his tree, a marvel to behold. It was poisonous, to be sure. Whoever rested beneath its shade, whoever wandered under its sweet odor, was stricken dead by its poisonous emanation. Even the good and clever gardener who had tended it succumbed. But he was neither the gardener who had loved this strange flowering tree more than his own immortal soul, nor was he one of those who by chance strolled through the garden and unwittingly fell beneath the spell. Who the hell is Doug Batchelor? He it was who first had plucked the fruit wherein was the seed. Since then he had ridden for many days through the savage forests of the undiscoverable, and had waded through the deep fever swamps of the inconceivable. His soul had breathed in many hot poisons, many pestilential exhalations, and full many a cruel and noxious vapor arising from a sinful flame. Oh, it had hurt him, tortured him, and torn open ulcerating abscesses, but it had failed to slay him. Again and again he arose, sound and healthy, beneath the roof of the sky, and now he felt as safe as though he went clad in blue chain mail of hard steel. Yes, surely he was immune. It was no battle to him, mere child's play, but then, if that was all it was, why should he stay? The game was not worth the candle, if she was but a toy doll, dangerous to others perhaps, but a harmless affair in his powerful hands. Then the adventure was entirely too cheap. Only a real battle against an opponent of equal ability and equal weapons was worthy of his steel. Fooling myself, he thought, his stature was really not quite so heroic. Often indeed he had enjoyed victories that had been easy and certain. He had counted them as episodes. No, this was not any different from the others. Did one ever really know one's opponent's strength? Was not the little poisonous wasp a more dangerous foe than the cayman into whose gaping jaws his Winchester planted certain death? He ran around in a circle, unable to think his way out. He always came back to this point. Stay. Good morning, cousin, Alraune laughed. She and Frida Gontram stood before him. Good morning, he answered curtly. Here, read these letters. It wouldn't do you any harm to ponder a bit on what you've been the cause of. It's time you stopped your nonsense and devoted yourself to something sensible and worthwhile. She looked at him sharply. Really, she said, and then drawing out every word, and what do you think would be worth my while? He did not answer because he had no answer in mind at the moment. He rose, shrugged his shoulders, and went into the garden. Behind him resounded her laughter. In a bad mood, Sir Trusty? In the afternoon he sat in the library. Thick briefs of cases lay before him. Attorney Manasse had sent them up the day before, and still he hadn't read them and wasn't reading them now. He stared into vacancy and hastily smoked one cigarette after another. Then he opened the drawer and again extracted the Privy Councillor's leather-bound volume. He read slowly and carefully, analyzing every single reported event. Someone rapped. The chauffeur entered hastily and announced that the Duchess Wolkonsky had arrived. She's very excited, he said, and even while still in her carriage, she yelled for the miss. So we thought it would be better if you saw her first. Aloysius is bringing her here now. Good, said Frank Braun, and jumped up to meet the Duchess. She squeezed herself laboriously through the narrow doorway and pushed her mighty rolls of fat across the dark room so sparsely lit by the oblique rays of the sun that managed to come through the interstices of the green Venetian blinds. Where is she? She panted. Where is Miss Ten Brinken? He gave her his hand and led her to the couch. She recognized him, called him by his name, but she had no notion of allowing herself to be enticed into a conversation. I'm looking for Miss Alraune, she cried. Fetch her to me. And she would not quiet down until he had rung for the servant and given him the order to announce the Duchess's visit. Then she consented to listen to him. He inquired after the health of her child, whereupon the Duchess overflooded him with a torrent of words explaining how she had found her daughter in such a benumbed condition that the latter had not even recognized her mother. She had sat at the window quietly, listlessly, and had looked out on the garden. It was the old clinic which the Privy Councillor used to have, and which Professor Dahlberg had transformed into an asylum for neurotics. The very house in which this he interrupted her, cutting short her voluble flow of words. He seized her hand and, with a pretense of great interest in her rings, bent his head down to examine them. Pardon me, your Highness, he cried rapidly, but where did you get that marvelous emerald? It's a real museum piece. It used to be a button on a grandee's toque my first husband wore at court ceremonies, she replied, an old heirloom. She was about to launch into her former topic, but he did not let her begin. It's a stone of rare purity, he assured her, and of remarkable size. I never saw one but like it. And that was in the royal stud of the Maharaja of Rolancourt. He had it set in his favorite horse's left eye. Its right eye was a Burmese ruby that was only slightly smaller. And he told her more of that strange hobby of Indian princes, how they gouged out the eyes of their favorite horses and substituted glass eyes or large Cabochon stones? It sounds very cruel, he said, but I assure your Highness, the effect is quite amazing. When such a splendid animal looks at you with fixed eyes of that Alexandrite, or gazes at you softly with deep blue sapphires. And he began to speak of precious stones. He remembered very well from his student days how she knew a great deal of jewels and pearls, how that was indeed the only thing that absorbed her interest. She answered at first quickly and desultorily, but with increasing calm and attention every minute. She stripped off her many rings and showed one after another, and told a little story about each one. He nodded and simulated interest. Now let cousin Alraune come, he thought. The first storm is over. But he was mistaken. Alraune came, opened the door softly, quietly crossed the carpet, and sat down in a chair opposite them. I am so happy to see your Highness, she piped. The Duchess cried out and gasped for a breath of air. She crossed herself once, twice, in the orthodox fashion. There she is, she groaned. There she is. Yes, Alraune laughed, very much alive. She stood up and extended her hand to the Duchess. I am so sorry, she continued, really very much put out, your Highness. The Duchess did not take her hand. For a minute she could not speak, but sat there gasping for air and struggling to regain her composure. Then she burst out, I don't need your sympathy. I want to talk to you. Alraune seated herself and motioned the Duchess with her hand. Please go right ahead, your Highness. Now the Duchess began. Did Miss Ten Brinken know that she had lost her fortune through the machinations of His Excellency? Of course she must know it, since all the gentlemen from the bank and the court had explained it to her in complete detail, and told her just what she ought to have done, but she had refused to do her duty. And did she know what had happened to her daughter? She related in what condition she had found Olga in the asylum, and what the doctor's opinion was. She grew more and more excited, and her voice rose loud and shrill. Oh, she knew all that very fully, Alraune declared calmly. The Duchess asked, what did she propose to do about it? Did she intend to follow in her father's filthy footsteps? Oh, he had been a fine scoundrel. A dirtier blackguard would be hard to find, even in fiction. Now he had gotten his just reward, too. She dwelt long on this picture of His Excellency and uttered whatever came to her mind. She assumed that Olga's attack was due not only to the unsuccessful mission, but also to the fact that Alraune had enticed her old friend away, and she believed that if Alraune would help her now, not only her fortune would be saved, but her daughter too, when she heard the news. I'm not pleading, she screamed. I'm demanding. I insist upon my rights. You, my own godchild, and your father have committed this wrong against me. Now you must repair it as far as possible. It's a shame that I have to tell it to you, but you wished it on yourself. What shall I save? Alraune asked quietly. As far as I know, the bank failed 3 days ago. In that case, your money is gone. She emphasized and dragged out the gone into a funeral dirge that left no doubt of the complete loss of the Duchess's fortune. That's nothing, the Duchess declared. The King's Council has told me that your father had put not quite 12 millions of my money in that rotten bank. You'll simply give me those 12 millions out of your own money. It won't ruin you. I know that very well. Oh, is that so? Miss Ten Brinken retorted. And is there anything else that I may do for you, your highness? There certainly is, the Duchess cried. You'll please inform Miss Gontram that she is to leave your house immediately. She must come with me at once to my daughter. I'm positive that with this financial affair settled, the presence of Frida will react very favorably on the Countess. A sudden cure would not be impossible. I will not reproach Miss Gontram for her ungrateful behavior, nor will I take any further action against you. Only I wish that this matter be settled right now. She ceased and breathed deeply, for this long speech had exhausted her. She took her handkerchief, fanned herself, and wiped away the heavy drops of sweat that beaded her scarlet face. Alraune rose slightly and bowed. Your Highness is too generous, she piped. That was all she said. The Duchess waited a while. Then she asked, Well? Well, Alraune returned in the same key. I'm waiting, the Duchess cried. So am I, Alraune replied. The Duchess slipped back and forth on the old divan, whose worn springs bent low beneath her weight. A mighty corset still cut her huge masses of flesh into some kind of a shape, but it hindered her movement. Her breath came and went. Unconsciously, her thick tongue came out to moisten her lips. May I have a glass of water brought for you? Alraune twittered. The Duchess acted as though she had not heard. What have you decided to do? She asked solemnly, and Alraune answered very simply, Not a thing. The old Duchess stared at her with her round, cow-like eyes, as though she could not understand what this young thing meant. She raised herself ponderously, took a few steps, and then gazed around, as if she were searching for something. Frank Braun rose, fetched the carafe of water from the table, and poured her out a glass. She drank it greedily. Alraune, too, had risen. I beg to be excused, your highness, she said. May I convey your greetings to Miss Gontram? The Duchess bore down on her, bubbling over with suppressed rage. Now she'll surely burst, Frank Braun thought. But she could not find any words to express her overpowering scorn. Tell her, she panted finally. Tell her that I never want to lay eyes on her again. She's just another as you are. You. She stamped up and down the hall with her heavy tread, gasping, sweating, swinging her mighty arms. Suddenly she caught sight of the open drawer and saw the necklace that she had once given to her godchild, diamonds set in golden chains, and strings of pearls surrounding a lock of the mother's flaming hair. An expression of triumphant hatred crossed her splotched face. She tore the necklace from the drawer. Do you know this? She shouted. No, said Alraune calmly. I've never seen it before. The Duchess stepped up close to her. So that scoundrel of a privy councillor embezzled it, just like him. It was my present to you, Alraune, as my godchild. Thanks, said Miss Ten Brinken. The pearls seem to be quite nice, and the stones, too, if they are real. They are real, cried the Duchess. They are as real as the hair that I cut from your mother's head, and she threw the necklace into Alraune's lap. The latter took the strange piece of jewelry in her hand and considered it carefully. My mother? She said slowly. She had beautiful hair, it seems. The Duchess planted herself before Alraune and put her hands on her hips, as sure of herself as a washerwoman. Very beautiful hair, she laughed. Very beautiful, so beautiful that all the men ran after her and paid her $1 to pass one night with her beautiful hair. Alraune jumped up. The blood retreated from her face for a second. But a moment later she began to laugh calmly, mockingly. You're getting old, your highness. You've reached your second childhood. That finished it. The Duchess could not restrain herself. And there's the necklace she threw. And there's the Duchess. That was her revenge. Anymore, she broke out into vulgar, shameless language like a drunken brothel mistress. She yelled and howled. Filthy words stumbled over each other as they poured from her lips like the contents of chamber pots. Alraune's mother was a whore, and of the lowest variety, who bartered her body for small change. And her father, whose name was Norrison, she remembered it very clearly, was a low-down rape murderer. The Privy Councillor had purchased the prostitute and used her in a knavish experiment. She, Alraune, who was sitting there in front of her, was the wretched fruit of this unnatural union, the daughter of a murderer and a whore. That was her revenge. With a light tread she walked out, triumphantly buoyed up by the glory of a victory that had taken 10 years from her shoulders. Now all was quiet in the library. Alraune sat in her chair, quiet and somewhat pale. Her hands played nervously with the necklace. Her lips twitched slightly at the corners. Finally she arose. Silly lies, she whispered. She took a few steps towards the door, then she reconsidered. She walked up to her cousin. Is it true, Frank Braun? She asked. He hesitated for a moment. He stood up and slowly said, I think that it is true. He went over to the desk, took the leather-bound volume, and handed it to her. Read this, he said. She did not reply, took the book, and turned to go. Take this too, he called after her, and handed her the dice box made from her mother's skull, and the dice fashioned out of her father's vertebrae. Wicked. Wicked, I tell you. Chapter 14 awaits. And that's a pretty short one. I hope to finish this book. Maybe tomorrow, so I can watch that damn movie. But we'll see. What page are we on? 284. So that's 58 pages to go. Who the hell is this? Malaya Gaddis. Yeah, a man. Go to channel. 128. What the fuck is this dumb shit? Alright, that's all, bros. All 0 bruvs that are present.